In New York, on West 54th Street, between 5th and 6th Avenues, in the garden of the Museum of Modern Art, there is a house. It is the third house built on the site during the last 6 years. The first two were contemporary American. This one, representing 16th and 17th century prototypes, is Japanese. It was presented to the museum on behalf of the people of Japan and accepted as a recognition of the unique relevance to modern Western architecture of traditional Japanese design. A house of this style might have been built by a scholar, a government official, or a priest, someone with the training and the leisure for reading and writing, someone having use for a desk. A desk is called a shoin in Japanese, and a house containing a shoin is called a shoinzukuri, which means, literally, the desk way of building. The building in this case was done in Japan in 1953. It was designed by Junzo Yoshimura. Shipped to the United States, it was reassembled in the spring of 1954 with great care and the usual precautions. The precautions extended from the prevention of finger marks on columns by the use of cloth wrappings to the formal exorcising of evil spirits. The raising of the ridgepole required not only carpenters and other workmen, but a religious ceremony complete with paper prayers and the right kinds of food. Among the early visitors was the Prime Minister of Japan. The idea that a house is a roof is not an unusual one, but the Japanese have developed it to an unusual extent. They regard the roof as the most expressive architectural element, and when they speak of the beauty of a building, they think at once of the proportions, the shapes, the modeling and texture of the roof. There are two decisive elements, the structural cage below and the roof above, one expressing the characteristic sense of construction, the other the sense of shelter. Both elements are required to make a home into a house. Sand originally was used in temple courtyards to purify the sites of religious ceremonies. Now it is standard garden material. The designs, raked or drawn, still may evoke a vague sense of something more, but the primary purpose is decoration. A house is a roof, and so the thickness of the eaves sometimes is exaggerated to produce an illusion of greater weight and density, stimulating the sense of shelter. The rafters are suspended from the beams and are not structural. They provide, as it were, a decorative echo of the cage beneath, such decorative repetition being one of the characteristics of Japanese building. A fake structural member sometimes is added to suggest that beams cross through each other. Similar effects in painting are called esaragoto, or the false made to seem true. The fictitious is added to heighten a valid effect. There are two sets of doors, outer doors of wood and inner ones of paper. Both may be removed entirely. The floors are covered with rice straw mats, usually about 3 by 6 feet in size, and the area of a room is indicated by the number of mats. Tables, screens, boxes, and bedding are stored away when not actually in use. The house itself is like a huge piece of furniture. The desk, or shoin, is built in. Cushions are used instead of chairs. There's a profound absence of clutter. It would violate the Japanese sense of the fitness of things. Space is empty, and a house, along with being a roof, is an arrangement of space. The alcove is not so much for the display of works of art as for their contemplation. It is felt that paintings are seen at a disadvantage when strung along a wall. A certain seclusion is essential to the enjoyment of delicate and subtle effects. Space, light, air, openness of plan, and lightness of appearance are essential to the conception of a house. The 20th century taste for open interiors and plain surfaces are Japanese ideas which we have begun to develop in our own way. A transom breaks up space while keeping a sense of openness. The pantry separates the kitchen from the rest of the house. Food is arranged on the bottom shelf for serving. The preservation of the natural curves of the tree trunk in a wooden beam reflects the tendency to use simple natural forms to suggest other forms. Naturally, the tendency works both ways. The beam suggests the tree, and the tree suggests the beam. Nature and art are thus united reciprocally. There are certain minimal requirements for a kitchen. Food has to be cooked, so there are ovens. There has to be a sink. A charcoal fire is kept going on the hearth. Since food, like so many things Japanese, tends to be decorative, its preparation may be complicated. The sink and drain board are, in effect, the aesthetic altar where a large part of the ritual is performed. No one who ever has experienced the delight of removing a lid from a red lacquer bowl to discover an elaborately carved radish floating in a clear broth will have anything but respect for the discipline involved. It is a discipline not unassociated with a sort of mythological approach which is peculiarly Japanese. Sashimi, for example, is sliced raw carp and a great delicacy. The actual preparation of this dish involves quite a lot of work. The mythical recipe changes all that. The live fish is simply placed on a plate, and some soy is dropped in one eye. Immediately the carp, which is incidentally a symbol of persistence, leaps upward in a final struggle and then falls apart in many pieces. Ovens are made of earth and white plaster, which is waxed. plumbing is one of the simpler things about a Japanese house. The bathtub is a wooden box from which there is a view of the garden, which should traditionally be very wet and very dark. Four and a half mats, a sunken hearth, a view of the garden, an alcove or tokonoma. The tea room is called the abode of fancy, the abode of vacancy, the abode of the unsymmetrical. It is dedicated to the ritual of the tea ceremony. A post supports a tree. A tree becomes a post.